The golden afternoon sun cast long shadows across the military training compound, where respect is earned through precision and legends are born from moments of impossible skill. In a world where assumptions run deeper than ability, where first impressions often become lasting judgments, the most extraordinary revelations come from the most unexpected sources. Sometimes fate orchestrates encounters that shatter everything we think we know about strength, capability, and the quiet power that lives within those society chooses to overlook. What appears ordinary on the surface can hide depths of excellence that take decades to reveal themselves, waiting for the perfect moment to emerge from the shadows of circumstance. In this dusty training facility outside Fort Collins, our story begins with Elena Rodriguez, a 48-year-old woman whose weathered hands and humble appearance were about to collide with a squadron of elite tactical officers who had never learned to look beyond the surface. She was about to remind them that some skills transcend time, that true mastery never truly fades, and that the most dangerous opponents are often the ones you never see coming. What happened next would rewrite the record books and change how an entire unit viewed capability, respect, and the hidden warriors walking among us. Elena Rodriguez, 48 years old, was a part-time janitor at the Fort Collins Community Recreation Center and weekend house cleaner for wealthy families in the suburbs. Her salt and pepper hair was always tied back in a practical bun, and her clothes, faded jeans and second-hand polo shirts, spoke of someone who had learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed. Her hands, scarred from years of cleaning chemicals and manual labor, moved with quiet efficiency as she mopped floors and emptied trash bins. Behind her tired brown eyes lay a weariness that came not from laziness, but from carrying burdens too heavy for one person to bear alone. She walked with the careful steps of someone who had learned to make herself invisible in spaces where she didn't belong. 15 years ago, Elena had been Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, one of the Marine Corps' most decorated female snipers. She had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, her steady hands and unshakable nerves making her invaluable in operations where a single shot could save dozens of lives. Her commanding officers had called her Phantom. She could remain motionless for hours, then deliver precision fire that seemed to defy the laws of physics. But military glory couldn't pay for her daughter Sophia's cancer treatment. When 7-year-old Sophia was diagnosed with leukemia, Elena faced an impossible choice: continue her promising military career or return home to fight a different kind of war, one against medical bills, insurance companies, and the crushing weight of single motherhood. Now her daily life was a relentless routine of survival. Elena woke at 4:30 a.m. to clean office buildings before their employees arrived. She spent her afternoons scrubbing toilets and washing windows at the recreation center, then her evenings cleaning houses for families who barely acknowledged her presence. Every dollar went towards Sophia's ongoing medical expenses and the small apartment they shared near the hospital. The financial pressures were suffocating, but spoken about only in whispered phone calls to creditors. Elena wore the same work uniform every day, carefully washing and mending it each night. She ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to save money and walked everywhere to avoid gas expenses, even in Colorado's harsh winters. Late at night, Elena would sit beside Sophia's bed, watching her now healthy 22-year-old daughter sleep peacefully, and hold a faded military commendation letter that spoke of exceptional marksmanship under combat conditions. Sometimes she wondered if that version of herself had been real, or just a dream she'd invented to make the scrubbing and cleaning feel temporary. Despite her struggles, Eleanor's generosity never wavered. When Mrs. Patterson from the 3rd floor couldn't afford groceries, Eleanor quietly left bags of food outside her door. She tutored immigrant children in English during her lunch breaks, never charging a fee. Last month, she had given her only warm jacket to a homeless veteran she found shivering outside the recreation center, telling him simply, "Brothers take care of brothers." Her kindness was invisible to those with power, but treasured by those who had none. Social workers knew they could count on Elena to translate for Spanish-speaking families. Hospital staff appreciated her gentle way with frightened patients. But to the professional world, she remained what she appeared to be, a middle-aged cleaning lady, easily overlooked and quickly forgotten. Today was different. The recreation center was hosting a community safety demonstration by the county's elite SWAT team. Elena had volunteered to help set up, never imagining she would become part of the event. As she arranged folding chairs and carried equipment, she had no idea that Gunnery Sergeant Phantom Rodriguez was about to step out of retirement. The universe was preparing to remind a room full of tactical experts that some skills lie dormant but never die, waiting for the right moment to prove that legends aren't always retired. Sometimes they're just disguised as the help. It was on a humid Thursday afternoon that everything changed, when storm clouds gathered overhead and the air crackled with the kind of tension that precedes something extraordinary. The SWAT team had arrived with the swagger that comes from years of elite training and the unconscious arrogance that comes from being treated as local heroes. 12 officers in full tactical gear transformed the humble recreation center into something resembling a military operation, their equipment cases and authoritative voices filling every corner of the space. Sergeant Jake Morrison, the team leader, was a towering man in his early 30s, with arms covered in tactical tattoos and the kind of confidence that had never been seriously challenged. His eyes swept the room dismissively as he noticed Elena quietly wiping down tables, her movements careful and unobtrusive. "Hey, lady," Morrison called out without looking directly at her. "We need this area completely clear. This isn't a place for—" He gestured vaguely at her cleaning supplies. "Whatever you're doing." "I'm Elena Rodriguez, the setup coordinator," she replied softly, continuing to clean. "I'm supposed to help prepare the demonstration area." Officer Danny Chen, younger and eager to impress his teammates, laughed loudly. "Coordinate, ma'am, we're demonstrating precision tactical operations, not organizing a church potluck." His comment drew appreciative chuckles from several other officers, their laughter echoing off the cinder block walls. Eleanor felt the familiar burn of humiliation rise in her chest, but she continued her work silently. This wasn't new, being dismissed, being made to feel like an inconvenience in spaces where she was actually needed. She had learned that fighting back only made the mockery worse. "Actually," Morrison said, checking his demonstration plan, "we need a civilian volunteer to show basic weapon safety protocols, someone to demonstrate proper stance and handling for the community folks." His gaze landed on Elena with the casual indifference reserved for convenient props. "You'll work fine, just hold the rifle like we tell you and try not to drop it." Officer Lisa Park whispered to her partner loud enough for everyone to hear. "Are we sure about this? She looks like she'd been knocked over by the recoil." More snickers rippled through the group, along with comments about liability issues and insurance concerns. Elena's hands stilled on the table she was cleaning. For a moment, 15 years collapsed into nothing, and she could hear her old drill sergeant's voice. "Rodriguez, show these recruits what real shooting looks like." She felt something stir deep in her chest. Not anger, but recognition of who she used to be. "What kind of demonstration?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying a subtle note that none of the officers quite registered. "Basic marksmanship principles," Morrison replied, already assembling a rifle from its case. "We'll set up some targets, show the civilians how proper breathing and trigger control work. Nothing complicated. Point, aim, squeeze, elementary stuff." Chen added with a condescending grin, "Don't worry, Senora. We'll start you with an unloaded weapon until you get the hang of it. Safety first, right guys?" The group's laughter grew louder, with comments about insurance nightmares and community liability. Eleanor nodded slowly, accepting the rifle when Morrison handed it to her. The familiar weight settled into her hands like a lost piece of herself returning home, perfectly balanced, exactly as she remembered. Without thinking, her grip adjusted to the textbook position, her body automatically falling into the stance that had once been as natural as breathing. "Whoa, hold up," Officer Park said, her training kicking in as she noticed Elena's positioning. "That's actually textbook form. Have you handled firearms before?" "A little," Elena replied, her voice still soft but carrying something new, a quiet confidence that made Morrison look at her with actual attention for the first time. "Well, let's see what you've got," Morrison said, gesturing toward the paper targets they had mounted at the far end of the gymnasium. "We've got standard targets at 50 feet. Just try to hit somewhere on the paper. That'll be impressive enough for the demonstration." Eleanor walked to the firing line with steps that were suddenly more purposeful, more military. As she raised the rifle, 15 years of cleaning floors and scrubbing toilets began to fall away like old paint. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied, and her world narrowed to the space between her eye and the distant target. The SWAT officers watched with growing curiosity as Elena settled into position with a precision that seemed to contradict everything about her humble appearance. Morrison exchanged a glance with Park, both sensing that something unexpected was about to happen. "Ready when you are, ma'am," Morrison said, his tone subtly different now, touched with genuine interest rather than condescending patience. Eleanor took a deep breath, and for the first time in 15 years, Gunnery Sergeant Phantom Rodriguez stepped out of hiding. What happened next would be replayed on phone cameras and discussed in tactical training circles for years to come. Elena fired 10 shots in rapid succession, each discharge following the other with mechanical precision. The sound echoed through the recreation center like thunder, a rhythm that spoke of muscle memory and training that civilian life had never managed to erase completely. When the final echo faded and Morrison examined the target through his scope, his face went completely pale. "That's not possible," he whispered, lowering the scope and checking it again as if it might be malfunctioning. Officer Park grabbed the scope from him. After a long moment of stunned silence, she turned to stare at Elena with an expression of complete disbelief. "Ma'am, you just put 10 rounds through a hole the size of a quarter, at 50 feet. The other officers crowded around to examine the target, their voices rising in amazement and disbelief. Chen was taking pictures with his phone, repeatedly zooming in on the impossibly tight grouping. "I've been shooting competitively for 12 years, and I've never seen civilian accuracy like that." Morrison pulled out his own phone and called their commander. "Sir, you need to get down here immediately. We've got a situation that—" "No, sir, not an emergency. Something else entirely." Eleanor lowered the rifle slowly, her hands trembling slightly, not from nerves now, but from the rush of returning to something she thought had died inside her. She looked at the officers' faces, seeing confusion, respect, and dawning realization replace the earlier mockery. "Ma'am," Park said, her voice completely different now, formal and respectful. "I need to ask you directly, what's your military background?" Eleanor removed her glasses and cleaned them carefully, a gesture that bought her a moment to decide how much truth to reveal. "I served in the Marines for 8 years, Scout Sniper specialization." "What unit?" Morrison pressed, his professional curiosity fully engaged and his earlier arrogance completely gone. 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, Afghanistan, 3 deployments. Elena's voice was quiet, but it carried an authority that none of them could ignore anymore. Officer Rodriguez, who had been silent until now, stepped forward with recognition dawning in his eyes. "Wait a minute. Elena Rodriguez. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Rodriguez." His voice rose with excitement. "You're Phantom Rodriguez. You hold the Marine Corps record for longest confirmed elimination. That record's been standing for 15 years. The room fell completely silent. Morrison's mouth actually dropped open. Park was staring at Elena as if seeing a ghost materialize before her eyes. Chen had stopped taking pictures and was simply gaping in amazement. "That record," Rodriguez continued, his voice filled with awe, 2,247 yards in mountain terrain with crosswinds. "They still teach that shot at Scout Sniper School. Instructors talk about you like you're a legend. The transformation in the room was electric. These officers, who had dismissed Elena as a harmless janitor, were now looking at her with the kind of respect reserved for proven warriors and military legends." Morrison ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling to reconcile the woman standing before him with the mythical figure Rodriguez was describing. "Ma'am," Morrison said carefully, all traces of condescension gone, "would you be willing to demonstrate long-range capabilities? We have extended targets available, and I'd like to call in our regional commander." Elena looked around the room at 12 faces that had completely transformed their expressions toward her. For the first time in 15 years, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't being dismissed or overlooked. She was being seen for who she really was beneath the uniform of poverty and necessity. "I suppose I could try," she said quietly, but her eyes held a fire that hadn't burned there in over a decade. The universe was about to witness the return of a legend. What followed became the most extraordinary marksmanship demonstration in the county's law enforcement history. Morrison immediately contacted his commander, then the state police, then representatives from multiple law enforcement training academies. Within 2 hours, Eleanor found herself surrounded by officials, cameras, and precision equipment she hadn't seen since her military days, high-powered scopes, ballistics computers, and rifles that made her fingers tingle with familiar longing. But as the crowd grew and the stakes became real, Elena's confidence began to waver. 15 years of scrubbing floors and being invisible had built walls around the part of herself that had once been fearless. What if her skills had deteriorated beyond recovery? What if this moment of recognition turned into public failure? "Ma'am, we're looking at 1,000 yards today," Morrison explained, his entire demeanor transformed from dismissive to deeply reverential. Wind conditions are challenging, gusting crosswinds, temperature variations. "We have professional spotters and all the equipment you need." Eleanor's hands shook as she accepted the precision rifle. The weight felt familiar, yet foreign, like greeting an old friend you weren't sure would remember you. "It's been 15 years since I've shot at distance," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The doubt crept in like poison. Officer Park, now completely respectful, asked gently, "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, why did you leave the Marines at the peak of your career?" Elena paused, pulling out a worn photograph from her wallet. A 7-year-old girl with no hair, smiling bravely from a hospital bed. "My daughter Sophia had cancer. The medical bills. I had to choose between my career and her life. There was no choice." Morrison nodded with newfound understanding. "And you never went back to competitive shooting? Never tried to maintain those skills?" "With what time, what money?" Elena replied, her voice heavy with years of sacrifice. "Between 3 jobs and hospital visits, then years of debt. I convinced myself that part of my life was over. Maybe it should stay that way." As she approached the firing line, Elena's mind filled with all the reasons she might fail. The wind was stronger than anything she'd trained in recently. The rifle, while excellent, felt unfamiliar in her weathered hands. The target seemed impossibly distant. Around her, she could hear officials making calls, describing the situation to superiors who were driving in to witness the event. "Ma'am," Morrison said gently, "there's no pressure here. You've already shown us more than we ever expected or deserved to see." But as Elena settled into position, something remarkable happened. The noise of the growing crowd faded into background static. The pressure of performance evaporated like morning mist. Her breathing slowed automatically, her heartbeat steadied into the rhythm she remembered, and suddenly she wasn't a 48-year-old janitor doubting herself. She was Gunnery Sergeant Phantom Rodriguez, and muscle memory took over where conscious thought ended. The first shot rang out across the range, then the second, then the third. Elena fired 5 shots at the 1,000-yard target, each one feeling more natural than the last. As she lowered the rifle, she realized she wasn't shaking anymore. The confidence that had carried her through 3 combat deployments was flowing back into her veins, like water returning to a dried riverbed. The range safety officer's voice carried across the facility, filled with professional amazement. 5 shots, all within a 4-inch grouping, at 1,000 yards, in variable wind conditions. The crowd erupted in amazed conversation, but Elena felt something even more important happening inside herself. The return of the warrior she thought had died in the transition from sergeant to civilian, from sniper to single mother, from legend to invisible. She was remembering who she had been before the world convinced her to become small. 1 year later, Elena stood in the main conference room of the Colorado Law Enforcement Training Academy, wearing instructor fatigues that bore the rank insignia she had earned all over again through a year of dedicated service. The transformation had been swift but earned. The state police had offered her a position as director of marksmanship training, with a salary that was 5 times her combined cleaning jobs. But more than financial security, they offered her something she had forgotten she deserved: professional respect and the opportunity to use her extraordinary gifts to save lives. Sophia, now 23 and cancer-free for 15 years, sat in the front row of the Academy's auditorium with her fiancé and their newborn daughter. The little girl they had named Elena in honor of her grandmother wore a tiny t-shirt that read, "Future Marksman." "Mom," Sophia had said when Elena called to share the incredible news, "I always wondered why you seemed so sad, even after I got better. Now I understand. You didn't just save my life, you gave up yours. But maybe it was always supposed to come back to you." Eleanor's transformation extended far beyond her professional resurrection. The confidence that returned with her shooting skills began to influence everything else. She moved through the world with the bearing of someone who knew her worth, spoke with the authority of earned expertise, and no longer made herself small in spaces where she belonged. The recreation center had dedicated their community room in her honor with a plaque that read, Elena Rodriguez Community Hero Award for those who serve others before themselves. Mrs. E. Patterson and the other residents she had helped over the years attended the ceremony, sharing stories of quiet generosity that had sustained them through their darkest moments. On the Academy's annual Honors Day, Elena was presented with the state's highest civilian marksmanship award and inducted into the Law Enforcement Training Hall of Fame. As she stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of officers and officials who respected her expertise, she spotted Morrison in the front row, applauding with genuine admiration and what looked like gratitude. "A year ago," she began her acceptance speech, "a group of officers reminded me of something I had forgotten. They showed me that our true gifts don't disappear when we stop using them. They wait patiently for the moment when we're ready to reclaim them. Sometimes we spend so many years taking care of others that we forget we're also worthy of care." After the ceremony, Elena walked to her car carrying awards and a letter from the Pentagon asking if she would consider consulting for their advanced sniper training programs. At 49, Gunnery Sergeant Phantom Rodriguez was being invited to influence the next generation of military marksmen. She sat in her car for a moment, holding the faded photograph of 7-year-old Sophia and smiling at the memory of the scared woman who had once thought sacrifice meant disappearing. The humble woman who had been mocked was now the expert training those who would protect others. In a world that often judges capability by appearance and worth by social status, Elena Rodriguez proved that extraordinary people sometimes hide in plain sight, disguised by circumstance rather than defined by it. Her story reminds us that true skill doesn't diminish with time or disappear under the weight of responsibility. It simply waits for the right moment to resurface. That the person cleaning our offices, serving our food, or working quietly in the background might possess abilities that could astonish us if we had the wisdom to look beyond the surface. The officers who initially mocked Elena learned a lesson that extends far beyond marksmanship. Respect should be given freely, not earned through displays of power. Every person carries stories of strength we haven't discovered yet, dreams deferred but not destroyed, and capabilities that transcend our limited assumptions. Elena's transformation from invisible janitor to celebrated instructor proves that it's never too late to reclaim the parts of ourselves we thought were lost. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from proving others wrong, but from remembering who we truly are beneath the roles life has forced us to play. How many legends are we walking past every day, waiting for someone to see their true worth?